Go ahead and have a seat. Let's watch your head on the mic. Remove your mask. Just look into this lens. Okay, whenever you're ready, go ahead. What do you think was maybe the toughest part about being here?
Yeah,
Okay.
Ooh. I think the hardest part of being on campus and in person this year was really just the uncertainty of it all.
Coming back in the fall, I was so excited just to be back on campus that I didn't really realize how different it would be.
When I look back on this whole year, whew, honestly, I felt like I was driving 95 miles per hour in a residential neighborhood.
The fact that I knew that we had to come back for in-person classes, it was like a really big thing for me because I had to fly 16 hours. I felt like I was stuck here because I could have been in a safer place at home, but I'm back here when the cases are like going up every day.
The hardest part of this year was definitely being in quarantine.
my roommate unfortunately tested positive for COVID, which sent me right into quarantine.
I was actually placed in quarantine.
I get put into quarantine because one of my other roommates tests positive. And this is the day before I was supposed to go to my grandfather's funeral.
The 2 weeks that we were moved fully online on campus and everything was kind of shut down, everybody had to like bunker in their rooms. It was like frightening.
I ended up having like a panic attack because I was just so stressed out. And in that moment, I realized that it was affecting my mental health as well, so I needed to take a step back.
That was probably the lowest point when I thought that senior year was going to be cut short before August was even over.
The next 3 weeks after finals, I, was so exhausted. I just slept all day long.
It's not about what you actually get in getting COVID and the symptoms you have. It's the pointing the finger and like, oh my gosh, did you hear that person got COVID? Did you hear why they got it? Did you hear that now their roommates can't do this or things like, and it's just, I think that was the toughest part.
It was a year full of injustices and the pandemic, but being here helped to process and get through those really difficult things going on in the world around us.
We mourned the loss of George Floyd. We mourned the loss of us having that physical contact with one another. And it reminded us that black or white, this was a moment where we're all in this together.
What generally do you think was the best part of being in person?
I feel obliged to say the Clemson game.
100% one of the highest points of this year was definitely the Clemson game.
Has everyone said the Clemson game?
I do think that the Clemson game was probably my peak. I felt like it was a really important thing to happen for the entire student body, that in this semester of pain and sorrow and hardships, we really needed a win. And not just a win in football, but a win just to really lift the energy and hopefulness of the campus. And whenever I get kind of sad, I think about that moment and I remember how cool that was and how exciting that was.
One of the highs of this semester was when I went to church on Easter morning and seeing members who I haven't seen in a year come back to church. That moment there, it warmed my heart because it's one thing to see someone over the screen on a computer, but we're also forsaking that human interaction. And I don't think we notice how important that is until we lose it. And 2020 and 2021 showed us that we need each other.
One of the best moments was also one of the worst moments in that I had just lost a family member due to COVID and was in a lot of pain because of that. I have been lucky enough to have an RA who I love so much and is so amazing, and he and I decided to go on a walk around the lake that day. I got to process those emotions through someone else who was walking alongside me.
One of my favorite parts of this year was having my dance team perform a dance that I choreographed. We did a flash mob of my dance, and that was on Library Lawn. And I go up in the middle of Library Lawn, and I just start dancing a little bit, and people just start looking, and that's when the beat drops and the whole dance team comes together, and we just break out dancing. Everyone was staring at us and clapping, and it was just a wonderful time.
The best time for me is when I was walking on campus randomly and someone called me from behind, and it turned out to be this girl that I met in my freshman year writing a rhetoric class, and we ended up sitting on a bench and chatting for an hour, just catching up and talking about life, and that's something that would only happen if I'm back on campus.
I found myself wandering to the grotto, and I lit a candle, and I just sort of sat there in the quiet, and when I was still, I just absorbed how beautiful this place is, not just aesthetically, but how beautiful its people are, how beautiful its traditions are, and how much I've changed, how much I've grown, and how much Notre Dame I have to thank for that.
Do you think it was worth it to be here?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
I think it was totally worth it.
Personally, I think yes.
Probably gonna cry. It was definitely worth it to come back in person this year.
It wasn't a perfect reopening, it wasn't a perfect year, but I will say, I think in a lot of ways, you know, for Notre Dame coming back, I think it's given people a sense of hope.
It was 100% worth it.
Oh yes, I would not trade it for the world.
I'm so grateful. It was never a question.
I would say yes.
It was just better to be here.
I think the best part of being in person was being able to see someone and bump into someone and have a 6-foot conversation with somebody.
At the end of the day, I think when I look back on this year, yes, it was different, but I'll remember the moments that still felt like my Notre Dame experience, and getting this extra year in person that some people didn't get at their respective schools, I think was huge. And in looking back on my experience and realizing, you know, how lucky I am to spend every day here, and that's something that, despite all the differences, I reminded myself, and it's not hard to remind yourself of that when you get to be on a campus as amazing as this one.